Don't let her go. Evelyn grabbed my hand, her voice barely a whisper, but her eyes were absolutely certain. I had driven to this lake house telling myself it was just one weekend. A favor for a friend. Pretend to be her boyfriend, smile for the family, drive home Sunday. Clean. Safe. No damage done. But standing in that hallway with an 80-year-old woman's hand wrapped around mine, I realized this grandmother had seen something in 48 hours that I had spent 11 months refusing to admit to myself. She wasn't warning me. She was telling me what I was about to lose. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. I want to tell you something about emergency rooms that most people don't understand. When someone comes through those double doors, chest open, eyes rolling back, family screaming in the hallway, you don't have the luxury of hesitation. You move. You decide. You act. Every single second costs something, and the worst thing you can do is stand there and feel too much. I had been an ER nurse for 8 years. I was good at it. I was good at staying calm when everything was falling apart. I was good at detaching myself just enough to function, just enough to do what needed to be done, and then going home and locking the door behind me like I could separate my professional self from whoever I actually was underneath all of it. The problem was that I had started doing the same thing in my personal life. 3 years ago, I was in a serious relationship with a woman named Dana. We were talking about moving in together. I had even looked at rings just casually, just to know what they cost, just to see what the options were. And then one night we had a fight. Not a catastrophic fight. Not a relationship-ending fight. Just the kind of argument that two people who love each other sometimes have, where voices get raised and things get said that aren't entirely meant, and then morning comes and you figure it out. Except I didn't figure it out. I looked at her face the next morning and I thought, this is going to hurt eventually. Maybe not today, maybe not for another year, but someday this is going to tear me apart. And so I ended it. Clean, quick, decisive, just like I would in an ER. Cut the thing that was bleeding. Stop the damage before it becomes irreversible. She cried. She said she didn't understand. I told her I was sorry and I meant it, but I still walked out the door. I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina 6 months later. New city, new hospital, new apartment. I told myself it was a fresh start. I told myself I was fine. And then about 11 months before any of this happened, I downloaded a dating app on a Friday night because my buddy Marcus called me predictable and said I needed to do anything that wasn't sitting on my couch watching sports documentaries. That was how I met Lauren Bennett. Our first date was a Saturday afternoon at a coffee shop in Dilworth. She was 29, a florist who owned a small shop called Wildroot, and she had this way of talking with her hands that made you feel like every word she was saying mattered. She was funny in a quiet way, the kind of funny where you don't realize she made a joke until 30 seconds after she said it, and then you're laughing alone. In the middle of a sentence, she's already moved past. We talked for 3 hours. I paid for the coffee. I walked her to her car. I told her I had a great time, which was true. And then I drove home and thought, there's nothing here. She's lovely and she's interesting, and there's absolutely nothing here that feels dangerous, so this probably isn't going anywhere. I texted her the next day and said something like, I don't think I felt the kind of chemistry I was looking for, but I really enjoyed talking to you. Would you want to be friends? Most people would have blocked me immediately. That was probably the correct response to that message. Lauren texted back 3 hours later and said, sure. Same time next Sunday. And you're paying again, since you're the one who friend-zoned me. I laughed out loud at that message alone in my apartment. I paid for the coffee. That was how it started. For nearly a year, Lauren and I did Sunday coffee. Sometimes we grabbed dinner. We texted constantly, not the performative kind of texting where you craft perfect messages, but the real kind. The kind where you send her a picture of a weird sandwich you saw at the hospital cafeteria, and she sends back 3 question marks and a laughing emoji. The kind where she calls you at 11:30 at night because a delivery of peonies arrived damaged and she needs to figure out whether she can save them, and you spend 45 minutes on the phone, knowing nothing about flowers, helping her problem solve anyway because you like the sound of her voice when she's thinking out loud. I told myself we were friends. I was very committed to believing this. Marcus told me I was an idiot. He said it every single time I mentioned Lauren in conversation. which had apparently become a frequent occurrence. "You talk about her more than you talk about your patients," he said once, "and you love your patients." "She's my friend," I said. "You don't know the coffee orders of any of your other friends," he said. "That's because my other friends can function without oat milk. You drive to the specific grocery store, 3 neighborhoods over, that carries the oat milk she likes when she's coming over." I had no response to that, so I changed the subject. The point is, I knew somewhere in the back of my mind that my feelings for Lauren had grown into something complicated. But knowing something and acknowledging it are two very different operations, and I had become excellent at the former while completely avoiding the latter. So when she called me on that Thursday night, I was sitting on my couch watching a documentary about the 1986 World Series, which tells you everything you need to know about the state of my social life. She didn't start with small talk. Lauren never started with small talk when she was nervous, and I could tell she was nervous from the first word. "I need to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to hear the whole thing before you say no." "Okay," I said. "My family is having a birthday celebration for my grandmother this weekend at the lake house near Asheville, and I kind of told them I was bringing my boyfriend." I waited. "The thing is," she continued, "I don't have a boyfriend. I have you, which is, obviously that's different. You're my friend." But I told them I was bringing someone because my aunt has been asking about my love life at every single family event for 2 years. And my cousin Vanessa specifically sent me a text last month that said, and I'm quoting here, "Are you sure you're not just too damaged from the Grant thing to actually connect with anyone?" And I told them I was seeing someone. I told them his name was Ryan. I told them he was kind and funny and worked in healthcare. I sat up straighter on the couch. "Lauren, I know exactly what I'm asking. And I know it's a lot. And I completely understand if you say no, because this is a lot to ask. How long is the weekend?" "Friday afternoon through Sunday. 2 nights. I pinched the bridge of my nose. "You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend in front of your entire family?" "Not my entire family. Just a significant portion of it. My parents, my aunt and uncle Vanessa, a few cousins, and my grandmother. Maybe 16 people total. That's your entire family." "It's a mid-sized portion of a larger family," she corrected. "Listen, I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. I tried calling my friend Priya first, but she's in Denver this weekend, and also she pointed out that I've been talking about you constantly for 11 months and that maybe I should just ask you." I ignored that last part. I was very good at ignoring things. "Lauren, if they figure out we're lying, they won't," she said quickly. "We know each other. We know each other really well. We just have to act like we like each other." Which we do. Because we're friends. So it's basically just friendship with slightly different body language. "That's not what that is, Ryan." Her voice dropped. She got quiet the way she did when she was about to say something real. "It's my grandmother's 80th birthday. Her name is Evelyn, and she hasn't been well. Her heart, some other things. The doctors aren't giving the family a very clear timeline, but everyone knows that this might be her last summer at the lake house because there's talk of selling it. She loves that place. She's spent 30 years of summers there. And she's going to spend this weekend watching everyone hovering over her health while my aunt and cousin treat my relationship status like a family emergency. I want her to have one good weekend. One weekend where the whole family isn't treating me like I'm broken." I stared at the ceiling. The problem with being an ER nurse is that you develop a very specific ability to recognize when something matters, when the stakes are real, when you're standing in front of something that counts. And Lauren, sitting on the other end of that phone call, with her voice steady, but her words trembling just slightly at the edges that counted. "Send me the address," I said. She exhaled so fast it was almost a gasp. "Really? Send me the address and tell me what I need to know. And I'm going to need the weekend off covered, so you're going to owe me one Sunday brunch, where you actually pay this time." She laughed a little too much, a little too relieved, and I could hear her smiling when she said, "Deal. I'll put a folder together. With the important things. Our backstory, dates, details. Lauren." "Yeah, I already know how you take your coffee." She went quiet for just a second. "Right," she said softly. "Right, you do." She sent me a folder on Friday morning. A physical folder. Because Lauren still did things on paper, she printed out flower orders and kept a handwritten calendar above her workstation. And apparently she also prepared detailed documentation for her fake relationship logistics. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee and read through it. Our official story was that we had been dating for 6 months, though we had known each other longer. We met through friends. This was close enough to the truth that it wouldn't require much maintenance. He, meaning me, was thoughtful but could be emotionally guarded, which she had written with a little asterisk and a note that said, "Stick close to the truth where possible." I liked coffee, sports documentaries, and rarely talked about my feelings unless pressed. She had written that he made her feel safe. I read that line 3 times. I made a note in the margin that said discuss, and then crossed it out and then closed the folder. The drive to Asheville took about 2.5 hours. Lauren had suggested we drive separately and meet there, but I offered to pick her up, which meant we had the car ride to align our story. She climbed into the passenger seat with a tote bag, a box of pastries for the family, and what appeared to be a controlled but substantial level of anxiety. "You ready?" I asked. She said flatly, "You?" "I've walked into rooms where people were actively dying," I said. "This is probably less stressful. You've never met my cousin Vanessa. Tell me about her." Lauren pulled one knee up onto the seat, a habit I had noticed she had when she was settling in for a long explanation. "Okay, so Vanessa is 34, works in finance, is objectively very successful, and has been in a relationship with the same man for 6 years. And she brings this up in some form at every family gathering. She's not mean exactly. She's just precise. Like, she finds the exact place where you're uncertain about yourself and she presses on it. Not loudly, quietly. That's what makes it worse." "I can handle that," I said. "She's going to ask you things. Like specific things. She's going to test whether you're real, Lauren." I glanced over at her. "I know you. You know me. We've been talking to each other almost every day for 11 months. Whatever she asks, we answer honestly." She looked at me with something I couldn't quite read. "That's kind of terrifying, actually." "Why? Because if we answer honestly, I don't know what we'll end up saying." I focused back on the road and let that sentence sit there between us, which was the wrong thing to do, probably. But I didn't have anything to say to it that I was ready to say out loud. We pulled up to the lake house just after 2 in the afternoon. It was a large property, a sprawling main house with a wraparound porch, situated directly on the water, with a dock that extended out into the lake. Several cars were already parked in the gravel lot. I could see lights on inside and movement through the windows. Lauren sat very still for a moment before she opened the door. "Hey," I said. She turned. "You're not broken," I said. "Whatever they think, whatever happened with Grant, you're one of the most whole people I know." She looked at me for a long moment, and something moved across her face that I couldn't name, and then she said, very quietly, "Thank you. Now act like you've told me that before." She got out of the car, and I followed her. The front door opened before we reached it, and a woman in her early 60s, Lauren's mother, Carol, came out with her arms already open. She was warm and loud, and she pulled Lauren in like she hadn't seen her in months, which might have been true. And then she turned to me with that particular appraisal that mothers have, the kind that catalogs your entire personhood in about 4 seconds. "Ryan," she said, and her whole face did something complicated. "Mrs. Bennett," I said, and shook her hand. "It's so good to finally meet you." "Oh, call me Carol, please." She looked at Lauren. "He's handsome," she said, as if I weren't standing directly in front of her. "Mom," Lauren said, "I'm just saying he's got kind eyes." She beckoned us inside. "Come on in. Everyone's here. Dad's on the porch, arguing with your Uncle Dale about something football-related, and Grandma Evelyn is in the living room, and she is so excited that you came, Lauren. She's been asking about you since yesterday." The inside of the house was organized chaos, voices and laughter, and the smell of something cooking. Children run down a hallway. 2 older men, visible through a sliding door that opened onto the back porch. Lauren navigated it all the way she navigated her flower shop during a busy morning, with purpose and ease, stopping to hug cousins and acknowledge introductions, and I stayed close to her side and did what I was there to do. And then Carol steered us into the living room, and I saw Evelyn. She was 80 years old, and she looked like someone who had earned every single year of it. She was seated in a high-backed chair near the window, a small woman, sharp-boned, with white hair pulled neatly back and eyes the exact same shade of dark brown as Lauren's. She had Lauren's posture too, that particular straightness, that wasn't stiffness, but attention, the body language of someone who paid close attention to what was in the room with her. She looked at Lauren first, and her entire face changed. Just lit up. completely and entirely. The way faces only do for the people they love most. "My girl," she said and held out her hands. Lauren crossed the room and bent down to hug her, and I stayed where I was, not wanting to intrude on something real. Lauren's grandmother held on for a long moment, her eyes closed, and I watched and felt something in my chest tighten in a way that I should have paid more attention to. Then Evelyn opened her eyes and looked directly at me over Lauren's shoulder. She didn't smile. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. Clear, steady, unhurried, like she was reading something. Lauren pulled back and said, "Grandma, this is Ryan." "I know who he is," Evelyn said. I walked over and offered my hand. She took it in both of hers, cool, paper dry, strong for their size, and she looked at me for another moment, that same clear, reading look, and then she smiled. And it was the warmest smile I had seen in years. "Sit down," she said. "Tell me something true about yourself." I liked her immediately and absolutely. "I'm terrible at sleeping," I said, which was true. "I work nights a lot, and even when I don't, I'm usually awake. Lauren knows she's gotten phone calls from me at 2 in the morning when I couldn't shut my brain off." Evelyn looked at Lauren. "Is that true?" Lauren was watching me with an expression I couldn't fully decode. "It's very true," she said. "I've talked him through more than a few long nights." Evelyn said. And there was something in that single syllable that felt like an entire observation. "There they are," said a voice from the doorway, and I knew from Lauren's barely perceptible physical shift that this was Vanessa. She was tall, polished, precisely put together, the kind of person who manages to look expensive without appearing to be trying. She had a glass of wine in her hand at 2:30 in the afternoon, and she smiled at us the way that certain, very intelligent peoples smile when they have already formed a hypothesis and are waiting for the evidence to confirm it. "Lauren," she said, hugging her, and the hug was genuinely warm in the way that complicated relationships sometimes produce. Because they had probably grown up together and probably loved each other, even now, and the competitiveness was just woven into the fabric of it. Then she turned to me. "And you must be the famous Ryan." "I've been called worse," I said. She looked me over. "Lauren talks about you constantly. Or she used to, before apparently you became an actual boyfriend. Funny how she never mentioned that part had changed." "I'm a private person," Lauren said, a little tightly. "How long have you two been together?" Vanessa asked, looking at me. 6 months, I said. "And before that, friends?" "About a year." "So you were just friends, and then suddenly you were together." She tilted her head just slightly. "What changed?" The question hung in the air. I didn't look at Lauren for the answer, because that would have been the tell looking at her to know what to say. I looked at Vanessa. "She called me on a Thursday night," I said. "She needed something, and she called me first. And I drove to her apartment at 10:30 at night, and I sat with her until it was okay. And when I was driving home, I thought that's how I want every day to work. I want to be the person she calls first." Vanessa studied me. Evelyn, from her chair, made a very small sound that might have been the beginning of a smile. "That's a nice story," Vanessa said, and her tone was careful in a way that meant she had filed it and wasn't done with it. Lauren's hand found my arm, and I felt her fingers close around it briefly, not the staged touch of someone following a script, but the instinctive reach of someone who needed a second of steadiness, and then she let go. "Let's get settled," she said. "I'll show Ryan the room." We were given a guest room at the end of the upstairs hallway, and Lauren closed the door behind us and exhaled slowly, and I sat down on the edge of the bed and watched her stand with her back against the door. "The Thursday night thing," she said. "It was the most honest answer I could give," I said. "Something similar happened." "When did I call you on a Thursday night?" "Last February. You found out that the venue you had booked for a Valentine's Day event had double booked and you were losing the reservation. You were panicked. You called me first." Lauren stared at me. "You drove to my shop. You needed help renegotiating with the venue. I'm persistent and I don't back down easily, and you knew that. You were there until midnight." "Yeah." And that was when she stopped. "That was when I knew," I said, and my voice came out quieter than I intended it to. And I looked at the floor, because looking at her right then felt like standing too close to something that might change everything. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "We should go back down." "Yeah," I said. "We should." Neither of us moved for a few seconds longer than we probably should have. Then she opened the door, and I followed her, and we went back downstairs, and the afternoon continued, and I kept telling myself that I was doing fine, that I had this under control. That 2 days was manageable, and then we would go back to Charlotte, and I would go back to being her friend, and everything would be exactly as it had been. I was very convincingly lying to myself. Dinner that night was a full production. Lauren's father Tom grilled on the back deck, a competent, quietly funny man who had sized me up in about 45 seconds and then decided on the basis of some internal calculus that I was acceptable, which expressed itself as an offer of his good beer from the cooler he kept separate from the family cooler. "I don't share this with just anyone," he said, handing me a bottle. "I appreciate that," I said. "Lauren says you're a nurse." He said it without judgment, which I noticed and respected. Some people said that sentence with a slight question at the end, a subtle recalibration, as if nursing didn't quite fit their picture of what a man Lauren might bring home would do. Tom Bennett said it like a fact. 8 years in emergency medicine, I said. He nodded slowly. "That's hard work, but it matters." I paused. "I'm good at it." He looked at me. "Good enough to stick with something hard?" I met his eyes.
Yes, sir.
He nodded again and clinked his bottle against mine and went back to the grill. And that was the entire conversation. And it told me more about where Lauren had learned to be direct than anything she had ever said to me directly. Dinner went well until it didn't. It went well in the sense that the food was good and the noise was warm, and there were toasts to Evelyn that made her laugh and wave her hand in the way of someone who is genuinely embarrassed by attention she nonetheless loves. It went well in the sense that I found myself in a conversation with Lauren's aunt about hospice care. She had recently volunteered at a center, and I was able to talk about it in a way that was useful and that made her reach across the table and squeeze my hand. It stopped going well when Vanessa leaned across the table with her second glass of wine and said, casually, to Lauren, "Whatever happened with Grant? Does he know you're seeing someone new?" The table got quieter. Not silent, but quieter, in the way of people who are pretending not to listen while listening very carefully. Lauren's jaw tightened just slightly. "I don't think that's something Grant and I communicate about anymore. He called Aunt Carol, Vanessa said, a few months ago. Said he was thinking about reaching out to you." Vanessa, Carol said with a tone of warning. "I'm just saying it's relevant information," Vanessa said, and there was nothing cruel in her voice. Exactly, just something relentless. "You ended a 4-year relationship and a fairly serious engagement, and some people in this family are still processing that." Lauren's hand found mine under the table. "I didn't think she knew she'd done it." "I made the right decision," Lauren said. "I'm not saying you didn't. You're implying it." "I'm asking if you're happy," Vanessa said, and her voice shifted into something that sounded more genuine, less clinical. "Because you've spent 2 years being very efficient about not answering that question." The table was quiet now, really quiet. Lauren looked at Vanessa, and then she looked at me, and something crossed her face that I had only seen once or twice in all the months I had known her. Something open and uncertain and briefly, frighteningly honest. "Yes," she said. Vanessa looked at me. I held her gaze and I didn't say anything, because I had learned a long time ago that silence, held with enough conviction, carries more weight than words. After a long moment, Vanessa picked up her wine glass and said, "Good," and the table shifted back to noise. Lauren's hand was still in mine under the table. I didn't move mine. She didn't move hers. After dinner, while the family drifted into the living room or onto the porch, I stepped outside to the end of the dock with a cup of coffee and stood there looking at the water. The night was warm, and the lake was dark, and the noise from the house was muffled by distance. I heard footsteps behind me, and I thought it was Lauren, but I turned and found Evelyn. She was moving carefully, with a steadiness that was clearly deliberate, the walk of someone who was compensating for something physical, without making it a performance. I moved toward her instinctively. "I'm all right," she said before I could say anything. "I just wanted some air and I saw you out here, can I?" I gestured toward her elbow. She looked at me for a moment, and then took my arm, and we walked slowly to the end of the dock together, and stood there. "You're good," she said after a while. "At what?" "At paying attention," she said. "At noticing things. Lauren reached for your hand twice tonight when she was anxious. Once at dinner, and once when she was talking to her cousin. You noticed both times, and you didn't make it a moment. You just let her. I didn't say anything." "That's a skill," Evelyn said. "Most people don't have it. Most people, when someone they love is nervous, they respond to their own discomfort about that nervousness. They do something. They talk. They reassure. They make it about themselves just slightly." She looked out at the water. "You didn't, You just held her hand." The honesty of what she was describing, the accuracy of it, made me feel exposed in a way that I wasn't prepared for. "She's important to me," I said carefully. "I know she is," Evelyn said. "I know because of the way you looked at her when she was talking about the roses. You didn't look like a man who was listening politely. You looked like a man who was saving it, storing it away." She turned to look at me. "What are you afraid of?" The question landed square in the center of something I had been avoiding for months. "Staying," I said, without thinking. She waited. "I'm good at showing up in a crisis," I said slowly. "It's what I do. I'm trained for it. But after the crisis is over, when it gets quiet, when it gets ordinary, I have a habit of leaving. Before it can fall apart." I paused. "Before I can be the one who makes it fall apart." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "Out on the water. Something moved, a fish maybe, or just the dark current shifting. You know what the kindest thing about ordinary life is?" she said. "What?" "It keeps showing up," she said. "It doesn't ask you to be heroic. It doesn't require you to perform. It just asks you to stay. And the people who can do that, who can stay when it's quiet and small and unremarkable, and still show up, those are the rarest kind." She took my arm again. "Let's go back in," she said. "I'm an old woman and I'm cold." I walked her back to the house, and she was steady and unhurried, and when we reached the porch, she looked up at me one more time. "She knows," she said. "Knows what?" Evelyn smiled, small, private, certain. "That you see her. She's just afraid it's not enough to make you stay." She went inside. I stood on the porch for a long time. From the living room, I could hear Lauren laughing at something her father had said, that particular laugh she had. The one that started quiet, and then caught itself by surprise and grew louder than she expected. And then she would cover her mouth slightly, like she hadn't meant to be that happy about something. I had been in love with her for months. I understood that, standing on that porch. I had understood it for a long time, actually. I had just been waiting for a reason that it was safe to acknowledge it, and I had not found one, and I had kept waiting. The problem was that I had started to realize that there was no reason. That safety was not a condition that preceded love. That the way it worked, the actual, honest mechanics of it, was that you stepped forward without a guarantee, and either you stayed or you didn't. And the only way to know which you were was to decide to be the kind of person who stayed. I didn't know if I was that person. Lauren appeared at the sliding door. "Hey," she said. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just getting some air." She came out and stood beside me and looked at the lake, and we stood in silence the way we often did. The easy silence of two people who didn't need to fill every space, and the night settled around us, and I thought, this is the thing I would lose. This exact moment. This ordinary quiet thing. This standing in the dark beside someone and not needing to say anything. "Your grandmother is remarkable," I said. "Yeah." Her voice was soft. "She is." She asked me what I was afraid of. Lauren looked at me quickly. "She did?" I told her the truth. "What truth?" I looked at her, this woman I had driven 2.5 hours to help, in a house that wasn't mine, in a weekend that wasn't supposed to count, and I thought about Evelyn's words. "She knows. She's just afraid it's not enough to make you stay." I told her I was afraid of staying, I said. I told her I'm better at showing up than I am at not leaving. Lauren was quiet for a moment. "That's honest." "I'm working on it," I said. She looked back at the lake. "Me too," she said softly. "I'm working on it too." We stood there until the chill came off the water, and one of the cousins called us back inside. And we went, and the evening wound down, and the family started saying their goodnights. And Lauren and I walked upstairs together in the kind of silence that is full of everything that neither person has figured out how to say yet. She paused at the door of the bedroom. "Ryan," she said. "Yeah." She looked at me with those dark brown eyes, Evelyn's eyes, her grandmother's eyes, and she seemed like she was on the edge of something. Then she said, "Thank you for tonight. You were." This was more than I asked for. "It's fine," I said. "No," she said, "it wasn't nothing. The doc with Grandma. The thing with my dad. The dinner." She shook her head slightly. "You were just you." I stood very still. "That's the problem," she said, so quietly I almost missed it. "That's the problem, Ryan." And she went inside, and I stood in the hallway for a long moment with my hand against the wall. And somewhere downstairs, I could hear Evelyn humming something old and soft to herself as she moved through the kitchen. And the sound of it was the most heartbreaking thing I had heard in years. Not because it was sad, but because it was so entirely the sound of a life, fully and honestly lived. And I thought for the first time that I was most afraid of wasn't staying. Maybe the thing I was most afraid of was what happened if I did, and it was everything I had been telling myself for 3 years that it couldn't be. That was the first night, and I still had a whole day to get through. Saturday morning came in fast. Ryan was already awake when the house started stirring. He had been awake for most of the night, actually, lying on the far edge of the bed, listening to Lauren breathe on the other side. Both of them maintaining a careful distance that required more effort than either would admit. He had stared at the ceiling and replayed Evelyn's words about 100 times. She knows. She's just afraid it's not enough to make you stay. He got up before 6 and went downstairs. He figured he would make coffee, sit quietly for 20 minutes, and get his head straight before the family descended. What he did not figure on was Evelyn already being in the kitchen, moving slowly between the counter and the stove, her white hair pinned back neatly, wearing a bathrobe that had probably been washed so many times it had achieved a kind of impossible softness. She looked up when he appeared in the doorway. She did not look surprised. "You sleep badly," she said. It was not a question. "Occupational habit," Ryan said, coming in. "Ear nurses work weird hours. My brain never really figured out how to shut off." "Sit down," she said. "I'm making oatmeal. You'll eat." He sat. He watched her move. She was careful but not fragile. She knew where everything was in this kitchen, the way people know spaces they have lived in for decades, with the body memory that bypasses the brain entirely. She reached for things without looking. She measured without measuring. "Did you and Lauren talk last night?" she asked, her back to him. "A little," Ryan said. "But no," he admitted. "Not enough." She brought 2 bowls to the table and sat across from him and folded her hands and looked at him with those clear, steady eyes. "What are you waiting for?" "I don't know," Ryan said. "The right moment. The right something." "There is no right moment," she said simply. "There is only the one you choose." She picked up her spoon. "My husband Harold waited 4 months to tell me he loved me. 4 months of Sunday drives and church picnics, and him turning red every time I looked at him. And then one Tuesday he called me on the telephone and said, 'Evelyn, I am not going to wait anymore because I am making myself crazy.' And that was it. That was the great declaration." She smiled at her bowl. "Not very romantic." "Sounds pretty good to me," Ryan said. "It was perfect," she said firmly, "because it was honest. He couldn't wait anymore and he said so. That's all love is, really. Being unable to wait anymore." She looked up at him. "What are you waiting for?" Ryan opened his mouth. And Lauren walked in. She was wearing an oversized sweatshirt and had her hair pulled up in a way that was clearly not intended for an audience. And she stopped in the doorway when she saw them and looked between them and said, "Why does this feel like a meeting I wasn't invited to?" "Because it was," Evelyn said serenely. "Sit down." "There's oatmeal." Lauren sat. She looked at Ryan, and he looked at her, and something passed between them, something that might have been embarrassment, or recognition, or both, and then she looked at her grandmother and said, "What were you talking about?" "Football," Evelyn said. Lauren looked at Ryan. "Football," he confirmed. Lauren narrowed her eyes. "Neither of you look like people who were talking about football. We were talking about waiting," Evelyn said, apparently deciding to abandon the pretense, and what people do when they're afraid to stop. The kitchen went quiet. Lauren wrapped both hands around her coffee mug and did not look at Ryan. "Grandma," she said quietly, with a warning in her voice. "I'm 80 years old," Evelyn said. "I don't have time to be delicate." That was the beginning of Saturday. By 9 in the morning, the house was fully awake and run at peak volume, which at the Bennett family lake house meant somewhere between controlled chaos and a sporting event. Lauren's Uncle Dale and her father Tom were already in a low-grade argument about whether to rent a pontoon boat for the afternoon. Carol was organizing the birthday cake situation with the focused intensity of a military operation. 3 cousins under the age of 12 were running a relay race through the living room that no one had technically approved, but no one had stopped. And Vanessa was watching Ryan. He noticed it during breakfast. She wasn't obvious about it, she was too precise for that, but every time he said something or did something, he could feel her attention like a measurement being taken. When he refilled Lauren's coffee without being asked, Vanessa's eyes moved to his hand on the pot. When Lauren laughed at something, Ryan said under his breath, Vanessa clocked the half-second it took before Lauren caught herself. She was building a case. Ryan could feel it. At 10:30, Lauren's father announced that they needed birthday party supplies from Town Balloons, candles for the cake, a particular brand of sparkling cider that Evelyn liked, and he asked if anyone wanted to make the run. Lauren volunteered immediately, and Ryan stood up without discussion. Vanessa stood up too. Lauren looked at her. "I need to pick up something anyway," Vanessa said, with a smile that gave away nothing. The three of them drove into town in Ryan's car. The town was 20 minutes away on two-lane roads through the mountains, and Vanessa took the back seat, and the dynamic in the car was the kind of polite that requires active maintenance. For the first 10 minutes, Vanessa asked Ryan questions. How long had he been in Charlotte? Did he like the city? Where was he from originally? Ryan answered easily, because none of those questions were traps. He was from Pittsburgh. He had been in Charlotte 7 years. He liked the city fine, preferred it in spring when the dogwoods were out. Then Vanessa said casually, "What's Lauren's coffee order?" Ryan didn't hesitate. "Medium oat milk latte. No sugar but 1 pump of vanilla if they have it. She says it's not the same as sugar because it's about flavor, not sweetness, which is a distinction I've stopped arguing about." Lauren turned to look at him from the passenger seat. Her expression was complicated. "That's specific," Vanessa said. "She's specific," Ryan said. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "What's her favorite flower?" "She's a florist," Ryan said. "She'll tell you she doesn't have favorites because it's unprofessional. What she actually loves is ranunculus, the peach ones. She keeps them at the front of the shop because she says they make people happy when they walk in. But I think she just likes having them where she can see them." Lauren had gone very still in the passenger seat. "What book does she reread when she's sad?" Vanessa asked. Ryan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You're testing me." "I'm asking," Vanessa said simply. "Jane Eyre," Ryan said. "She's read it at least 6 times. She says it's because she likes the prose. But I think it's because Jane Eyre is someone who keeps choosing herself even when it costs her everything. And Lauren finds that steadying." On difficult days, the car was completely silent. Vanessa said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, so quietly it was almost not there, she said, "Okay. Just that. Just okay." Lauren didn't turn around again for the rest of the drive. Ryan could see the line of her jaw, and the way she was pressing her lips together slightly, the expression she had when she was thinking too hard about something and trying not to show it. In town, they split up. Vanessa went to get whatever she said she needed, and Ryan and Lauren moved through the small party supply store side by side, pulling things off shelves. "You know about Jane Eyre," Lauren said, not looking at him. "You mentioned it once," Ryan said, examining a package of birthday candles. "February, I think. You were having a bad week, and you said you were rereading Jane Eyre and that it was helping." "I remembered." "You remember everything," she said. Her voice was strange, not upset, exactly. "Something more complicated than that." "I pay attention," he said. She stopped in the middle of the aisle and turned to look at him. "Ryan?" "Yeah. Why do you pay attention like that?" He held her gaze. "You know why." She looked away first. "Don't say it here," she said very quietly. "Don't say it here. Because I need to think, and if you say it here I won't be able to think." "Okay," he said. "Okay," she repeated, and picked up a bag of balloons, and they went to the register, and neither of them said anything more about it. Vanessa rejoined them outside, and the drive back was quieter than the drive there, in a way that felt different, not strained, but full, like a room where all the furniture has been rearranged and you're still adjusting to how it sits. When they got back to the house, things moved fast. Lunch, then the pontoon boat, which Tom and Dale had agreed on by some compromise, neither explained, but both seemed satisfied with. The whole family went out on the water for 2 hours, cousins shrieking. Carol trying to photograph everything. Evelyn sitting in the best seat at the front, with her face turned toward the sun and her eyes closed, looking like someone who had earned the right to feel every warm thing. Ryan sat near the back with Tom. They didn't talk much. But Tom handed him a bottle of water and said, "She hasn't looked like this in a long time, you know." "Evelyn?" Ryan asked Lauren. Tom looked at his daughter across the boat. "She's been very careful, since the thing with Grant. Very controlled. Like she was managing herself. She looks different today." He paused. "Lighter." Ryan watched Lauren, who was leaning over the side of the boat to trail her hand in the water, laughing at something a younger cousin had said, her hair loose and moving in the lake wind. "She's remarkable," Ryan said. He didn't try to make it sound casual. Tom looked at him sideways. "She is." The boat returned to the dock late afternoon, and the family dispersed to rest before the birthday dinner. Ryan was helping carry the cooler up from the dock when he heard it a creak from the back porch, and then nothing, and something about the nothing made him stop. He found Evelyn on the porch chair, her eyes closed, her color off. He moved without thinking. 8 years of emergency medicine, and the body knows things before the brain finishes the sentence. He was beside her in 3 steps, 2 fingers to her wrist, his other hand lightly on her shoulder. Her pulse was there. Slow but steady, her breathing was okay. "Mrs. Bennet," he said, quiet, and even Evelyn. Her eyes opened. She looked at him, slightly disoriented, and then cleared. "Oh," she said, "I fell asleep." "You scared me," he said, still taking her pulse. "I scare myself sometimes," she said dryly. "Don't make a fuss." "I'm not making a fuss. I'm taking your pulse." He checked her breathing, asked her a few quick questions. Where were they? What was today? Did she feel any pain in her chest or arm? And she answered all of them correctly, and with increasing impatience. "I'm old," she said. "Not dead. I need you to drink some water and sit for a few minutes before you go back inside," he said. "Fine, and tell me if you feel dizzy again." "Fine." He sat on the porch step next to her chair and watched her drink the water. She held the glass in both hands and looked at him over the rim with an expression that was half annoyance and half something else entirely. "You didn't call anyone," she said. "You didn't need anyone called. You needed water and 2 minutes of quiet." She set the glass down. Most people would have run and gotten the whole family involved. Made a scene. Used it as an opportunity to perform concern. "That wouldn't have helped you," Ryan said. "No," she said. "But it would have made them feel better." She looked at her hands. "That's the thing about getting old. People stop responding to how you actually are and start responding to how scared they are about how you might be. It's exhausting him. You saw me. You responded to me. He didn't say anything. Don't waste that," she said firmly. "That quality, that seeing. Don't waste it on an empty apartment and a job and nothing else." She met his eyes. Lauren needs someone who sees her. Not who she could be. Not who she was with that other man. Who she actually is right now today. Ryan sat very still on that porch step. "What happened with Grant?" he asked. It came out before he decided to say it. Evelyn set her water glass on the arm of the chair. "Grant Holloway is a man who loved the idea of Lauren more than he loved Lauren. He wanted her neat and small and admiring. She is none of those things. She tried to be for a while, because she loved him, and she wanted it to work. And one day she looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize who was looking back. She shook her head. She spent 2 years after that being very, very careful about who she let close, keeping everyone at exactly the right distance. She looked at Ryan. Except you." He felt the weight of that. The full weight of it. "She let you all the way in," Evelyn said. "And then she called it friendship so neither of you would have to be afraid." Inside the house, Lauren was calling something to her mother. Her voice carried through the window, clear and warm and alive. Ryan listened without meaning to. "The way you listen to something you need to remember." "Go help your girlfriend with dinner," Evelyn said, with a satisfaction in her voice that she did not try to hide. Dinner preparation was its own kind of intimacy, it turned out. The kitchen was large and noisy, and everyone had an opinion about everything: the right temperature for the roast, whether the salad needed more lemon, how thin to slice the bread. Ryan found himself beside Lauren at the counter, both of them assigned to the side dishes, and the proximity was easy and practiced, in a way that had nothing to do with the weekend, and everything to do with the hundreds of small moments that had built up between them over 11 months. Lauren talked while she worked. She narrated, really a habit Ryan had always found quietly charming. This way she had of thinking out loud, commenting on what she was doing in real time the way a person does when they've spent a lot of time working alone. He handed her things before she asked for them. She reached for things he was already holding out. Carol stood at the other end of the counter and watched them with an expression that she quickly rearranged every time Lauren looked up. "You two are very coordinated," Carol said with elaborate casualness. "We cook together sometimes," Lauren said. "Do you?" Carol said. "Don't," Lauren said, knowing exactly where that sentence was going. "I'm not saying anything, Mom. I'm simply observing." "Mom." Carol smiled into the salad bowl and stopped talking. Ryan caught her eye for 1 second over Lauren's shoulder, and she gave him the look of a woman who had been waiting a very long time for something she recognized, and was glad it had finally arrived. Dinner itself was almost completely fine. Almost. The table was crowded and loud, and the food was good, and Evelyn was at the head of it all, present and sharp and clearly happy, receiving the love her family was giving her with a grace that Ryan found himself watching the way you watch someone who knows exactly what they're doing. She deflected the hovering. She redirected the anxiety into laughter. She held the whole table together, without appearing to try. Ryan was refilling his water glass when the front door opened. He didn't see it happen. He heard the door, and then he heard Lauren's father make a short, stiffened sound, and then he saw Lauren go very still. And he followed her eyes to the entrance of the dining room. The man in the doorway was tall, polished, good-looking in the precise and effortful way of someone who has always understood their appearance as an asset. He was wearing a jacket over a collared shirt, which was perfectly chosen for a family dinner in the mountains, formal enough to signal success, casual enough to signal that he hadn't tried. He carried a wrapped gift. He smiled at the table with the ease of someone who had eaten at it many times. "I hope I'm not too late," Grant Holloway said. "I wanted to bring something for Evelyn." Ryan did not look at Lauren. He looked at Vanessa, because Vanessa was the one who was not surprised. Vanessa's expression was controlled in a way that required control. She was not smiling, but she had known this was coming. She had invited him. Ryan could see it in the precise neutrality of her face. Lauren's hand found the edge of the table. Carol said, carefully, "Grant, we didn't know." "I called ahead," Grant said pleasantly, which was almost certainly a lie, but delivered with the confidence of someone who understood that the polite option for the room was to accept it. He looked across the table, and his eyes found Lauren, and then Ryan. Something shifted in his face, just briefly. A recalibration, like a man rerunning a calculation with a new variable. "Lauren," he said warmly, "you look wonderful." She did not stand up. "Grant," she said. Her voice was perfectly level. His eyes moved to Ryan. "And you must be," he said, with a smile that extended no further than the muscles required to produce it. "The new friend." The word friend landed exactly where he intended it to land. Ryan looked at him steadily and said nothing. Grant was seated at the far end of the table away from Lauren, but not far enough. The dinner continued. Evelyn accepted his gift with the graciousness of someone who understood that the most powerful response to a social transgression is to refuse to acknowledge it as one. She thanked him and set it aside and redirected the conversation with the precision of someone who had been managing rooms for 80 years. But Grant was patient. That was the thing about him. Ryan could see it within 10 minutes. Grant was a man who played long games. He didn't push in ways that were visible. He made comments that sounded like compliments and landed like corrections. He asked Lauren questions in the tone of someone concerned, and the questions themselves were designed to remind everyone at the table of a history in which Ryan did not exist. "Do you still work those 16-hour days at the shop?" Grant asked during a lull. "It's my shop," Lauren said. "I run it how I want to." "Of course," he said warmly. "I always admired your dedication." The word admired in the past tense. Ryan noted it. Lauren noted it. He could see it in the slight tightening of her jaw. "Ryan," Grant said. "Pivoting. What is it you do?" "Emergency medicine," Ryan said. "A nurse," Grant said. "A beat. That's important work." It was the delivery. 2 sentences, and the second one just slightly delayed, just long enough to do the work of suggesting that he had needed a moment to find something kind to say about it. Lauren's jaw was fully tight now. Ryan smiled pleasantly at Grant and said, "It is. I've gotten good at knowing when something is a real emergency, and when it's just someone who needs to be told they're fine and sent home." The table went on. But Grant had heard him. After dinner, while the family moved toward the living room for cake preparation, Grant appeared beside Lauren in the hallway. Ryan was 3 feet away talking to Tom, and he heard every word. "I just wanted to see you were well," Grant said quietly. "I've been thinking about reaching out for a while." "I'm well," Lauren said. "You look happy." He said it like a diagnosis. "Though I wonder sometimes if you know how you get, Lauren. When something feels safe, you can confuse that with it being right." Lauren was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "What does that mean?" she said very quietly. "It means," Grant said carefully, "that you have a pattern of choosing what's comfortable over what's meaningful. I loved you very much. I still think we could have built something real." "We built something," Lauren said. "I just wasn't in it." "That's not I know what I felt, Grant," she said. "And I know what I didn't feel." Ryan set down his drink on the table slowly and turned. Grant looked at him. "I think this is a private conversation." "Then have it somewhere private," Ryan said. His voice was calm. Completely calm. The voice he used in emergency rooms when things were going sideways, and calm was the only tool that worked. Grant looked at him for a long moment, the evaluation visible measuring, deciding. Then he looked back at Lauren. and his voice dropped into something that was meant to sound reasonable and landed as a warning. "I just don't want to see you make another decision you'll regret." "Then you should leave," Lauren said. Grant left. Ryan turned to Lauren. Her face was rigid with the effort of maintaining composure in front of a house full of family. "You okay?" he said low. "No," she said honestly. She pressed her lips together. "But I will be. Do you want to go somewhere? Get some air?" She shook her head. "I'm not hiding from him." She looked at Ryan. "I'm done hiding from people who make me feel like I should." She walked back into the living room, and Ryan stood in the hallway for a second and thought, "God, she is something else." Then he followed her. The birthday cake came out at 9, and Evelyn looked at the 80 candles, not all of them lit, because the fire hazard was apparently a family conversation, and she laughed. That real and helpless laugh she had, and the whole room softened and leaned in. Lauren stood beside Ryan during the singing. At some point he wasn't sure when her hand found his, and this time it wasn't instinctive anxiety. It was deliberate. He could feel the difference. She wasn't reaching for steadiness. She was reaching for him. He held on. Evelyn closed her eyes before she blew out the candles. The room was quiet in that particular way of a moment everyone knows they're going to remember. She blew them out in one breath. The family cheered, and Evelyn opened her eyes. And the first person she looked at across the table was Ryan. And she smiled at him with a certainty that felt like a door swinging open, like she had made a decision about something, or confirmed one, and was satisfied. Grant left shortly after the cake. He made his goodbyes smoothly and efficiently, and he kissed Carol on the cheek and shook Tom's hand, and hugged Evelyn with a gentleness that Ryan suspected was genuine. He was not a simple man, Grant Holloway, and whatever his flaws, he had apparently loved Evelyn. He did not hug Lauren. He shook Ryan's hand briefly, and said, "Good to meet you," and Ryan said, "Take care," and that was the end of it. The family wound down slowly. Children were put to bed. Cousins drifted to the porch. Tom and Dale took their argument about the boat rental into the kitchen, where it could be resolved with snacks. Ryan found himself at the dock again. Same spot as the night before, same dark water, same muffled sounds from the house behind him. This time Lauren came without being summoned. She sat beside him, right beside him, closer than friendship strictly required, and leaned her shoulder into his and stared at the water. "He's wrong," Ryan said. "You don't confuse safe with right. You know exactly what you're doing. You heard that. I was 3 feet away." She was quiet. "I used to not know. I used to think he was right about that I chose comfortable over meaningful. That what I left was meaningful, and I was just scared." She breathed out slowly. "But then I figured out that I wasn't scared of the relationship. I was scared of who I was becoming inside it. And those are different things." Ryan nodded slowly. "When I'm with you," she said, still looking at the water, "I don't feel like I'm becoming smaller. I feel like there's more room." He was very still. "I know that's not fair to say," she said. "In the context of this weekend and what we agreed to and everything. I know it complicates things, Lauren." "I know," she said. "I know. I'm just being honest. Because Grandma told me to stop managing myself and start saying the true thing, and I'm trying." Ryan turned to look at her. "The true thing," he repeated. "Yeah." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair back from her face, the way he had done it 100 times in his head and never once in real life, and he felt her go very still under the touch. His hand rested against her cheek for just a second, and she turned her face into it, barely perceptibly, like something involuntary. "I stopped pretending this was fake about 3 hours after we got here," he said. She looked at him. Her eyes were very dark in the night, and very certain. "I know," she said softly. He wanted to say the thing. He felt it right there, fully formed, ready. But he could hear her voice from the car, "Don't say it here, because I won't be able to think." And he thought maybe the dock at the end of the lake in the dark wasn't the right place, either. "Not yet. Get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow's the official party." She searched his face for a moment, like she was checking something. Then she nodded. "Tomorrow," she said. They went back to the house. The lights were mostly off. The family was quiet. At the top of the stairs, Lauren paused at the door again, same as the night before. Except this time, she turned and looked at him with something clear and uncomplicated in her face, and she said, "Ryan, whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know that this weekend, whatever it was, it mattered." He stood in the hallway and felt the words settle. "I know," he said. She went in. He stood there for 30 seconds, his hand on the wall, his chest full of something that had no clean name and no easy exit, and then he went to bed. He did not sleep. He was up at 5:30. Not because he had slept and woken, he had not slept. Not really. Not anything more than the shallow half-conscious drift that his body sometimes settled for when his brain refused to fully stop. He lay on his side of the bed at his house and thought about the dock and the dark water, and Lauren's face when she turned into his hand and said, "I know." And by 5:30, he had decided that lying still was doing more damage than getting up would fix. He dressed quietly and went downstairs and made coffee and stood at the kitchen window and watched the lake go from black to gray to the particular pale gold that comes just before the sun clears the mountains. Sunday, the last day. The official birthday party was this afternoon, the real one. The one with the decorated porch and the whole family, and the cake Carol had been planning for 3 weeks, and the carefully arranged photo moments that would live on someone's phone for years. After that, people would start leaving. Ryan and Lauren would drive back to Charlotte. He would drop her off. He would go home to his apartment. He would go back to being her friend. He stood there with his coffee, and he thought about that with a clarity that was almost physical. The drive home, the handshake at the door, or the hug they usually hugged goodbye, comfortable and practiced, the hug of two people who had decided what they were to each other. Except now he didn't know what that was anymore. He wasn't sure he had known for a while. He had just been very committed to not finding out. Evelyn's words from the kitchen yesterday morning had worked their way into somewhere he couldn't reach and push out. "What are you waiting for?" And the other thing, the thing from the dock Friday night. "She's just afraid it's not enough to make you stay." The problem with hearing the truth from someone who had lived 80 years was that it didn't have the quality of opinion. It had the quality of fact. Like being told the temperature of water by someone who had been swimming in it their entire life. Carol came downstairs at 6:15 and found him at the window and said, "You're up early." And he said, "Habit." And she poured herself a cup of his coffee and stood beside him in comfortable silence for a moment, which told him something about where Lauren had learned to do the same thing. She was very unhappy, Carol said without preamble. After Grant, people thought she handled it well because she didn't fall apart publicly. She went back to her shop, and she worked, and she seemed functional. But I'm her mother. I could see it. She had closed something off. She was running on a very narrow track, and anything that didn't fit on that track, she cut loose. She paused. And then she started mentioning you. Ryan looked at her. "She mentioned you like you were a fact," Carol said. "Like the weather. Like something that was just there, that she didn't have to think about. And that was different." She drank her coffee. That was new. Before he could answer, Lauren appeared in the doorway, in the same oversized sweatshirt from yesterday, her hair down, and she stopped when she saw her mother and Ryan at the window together, and she looked between them and said, "What is it with this family and ambushing people before 7 in the morning?" "We're talking about the weather," Carol said serenely, and put her coffee mug in the sink and went back upstairs. Lauren looked at Ryan. "Were you really talking about the weather?" she said. "No," he said. She crossed to the coffee maker and poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter and looked at him over the rim. The morning light was different from the night before, sharper, cleaner, with nowhere to hide. He didn't try to. "Last night," she started. "I meant what I said," he cut in quietly. She was still for a moment. "I know. I'm not walking it back." "I know," she said again. She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I'm not asking you to. I need us to get through today, Ryan. The party, Grandma's Day, and then we can, I don't know, figure out what any of this means after." He nodded. "After." "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. They stood in the kitchen in the Sunday morning quiet and drank their coffee, and it was the most ordinary and the most loaded thing Ryan had done in years. The morning built toward the party, the way weather builds toward a storm gradually, and then all at once. By 10, Carol had mobilized the family into a coordinated decorating effort. By 11, Tom and Uncle Dale had achieved a historic consensus and were setting up chairs on the back deck without arguing. The cousins were assigned tasks that matched their age and competence, which required some negotiation. Lauren ran between stations with a quiet efficiency that Ryan recognized as her flower shop mode, the version of her that knew exactly how to make a chaotic space into something that looked intentional. Ryan stayed useful. He moved furniture when asked. He hung a banner when no one else was tall enough to reach the hook without a ladder, and the ladder was occupied. He kept an eye on Evelyn, who was sitting in her preferred chair on the porch, watching all of it with the focused pleasure of someone who understood. She was the reason the whole machine was running. At 11:30, Vanessa found him. She came around the corner of the porch where he was untangling a string of outdoor lights, and she stood there for a moment without saying anything, in that precise way of hers. And he kept working, because he had learned in 2 days that with Vanessa, showing you had noticed her was a kind of concession. "I owe you something," she said finally. He looked up. Vanessa's expression was not soft exactly, but different from the measuring look she had been wearing since Friday. Something more honest. "I've been watching you," she said. "I noticed," he said. "I do that with people Lauren brings around. Or anyone she's close to, really. She lets people in carefully, and when she does, I want to make sure they deserve it." She crossed her arms. She got hurt very badly. Not just by Grant, by the whole thing. The engagement, the planning, and then having to undo all of it while everyone stared. She spent months having to explain herself to people who thought they were owed an explanation. Ryan set the lights down. "I know Grant came because of me," Vanessa said. "I called him. I thought if she saw him, she'd either realize she was over it or realize she wasn't, and either way it would be information." She paused. "I didn't think about what it would cost her to have to deal with him here." "She handled it," Ryan said. "She handles everything," Vanessa said, and the impatience in her voice was clearly directed at herself. "That's not a compliment. That's a habit she built out of necessity." She looked at him directly. "What I've been watching for is whether you see that. Whether you see what's underneath the handling." He held her gaze. "I see it," she studied him. "The coffee order and the book. That was real, wasn't it? You didn't read that in a file." "No," he said. How long he knew what she was asking. He thought about the Thursday night in February. The Valentine's Day emergency. Driving to her shop. Being there until midnight. Knowing on the drive home that something had shifted and choosing to name it friendship anyway. "A while," he said. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded once, with the decisiveness of someone who had completed a calculation to her satisfaction, and she picked up one end of the tangled lights and said, "Let me help you with this." They untangled the lights together in silence, and it was the closest thing to a peace treaty he had experienced outside an actual treaty. The party started at 2 in the afternoon. 45 minutes in. It was everything Carol had planned for, and Evelyn was at the center of it. Receiving it all with that particular grace, she had accepting the love without being diminished by it. Giving it back in the way of someone who understood that being loved well was its own art form. Ryan was standing near the edge of the deck, watching when he heard Vanessa's voice from inside the house. Louder than her usual register. Sharp. He didn't think much of it until he heard Lauren's name. He moved to the sliding door in time to see Vanessa standing in the living room with Lauren's phone in her hand. Her face doing something complicated, not cruel, but not controlled either. The face of someone who has already done the thing and is now dealing with what it costs. Lauren was across the room, and her expression was the one Ryan had never seen on her before. Not the handling face, not the careful face. Just bare, stripped-down shock. 3 cousins were watching. Carol was at the edge of the room. Tom was behind her. Ryan stepped inside. "What happened?" he said quietly, to no one specifically. Vanessa's jaw was tight. She set Lauren's phone on the coffee table, face up. Ryan didn't look at the screen. "I picked up Lauren's phone to check the time," Vanessa said, and her voice was stretched in the way of someone who knows they have to say the thing, but is only now understanding the full cost of it. It opened to a text thread. She stopped. It said fake boyfriend plan at the top. The room went very still. The whole message, Vanessa continued, and now she sounded not triumphant. Tired. Like someone who had expected to feel something different from what they were feeling. It was Lauren explaining to her friend Priya. The whole setup. That Ryan had agreed to come as her boyfriend for the weekend because she'd told the family she was seeing someone. Carol made a small sound. Tom said nothing. 3 cousins looked at each other with the wide eyes of people witnessing something they knew was above their pay grade. Lauren had not moved. She was standing in the center of the room, looking at Vanessa with an expression that Ryan could not fully decode because it was too many things at once: humiliation and grief and something that looked almost like relief. The relief of someone who has been carrying a secret that was always going to have to come down. "Lauren," Carol said softly. Mom Lauren's voice was very even. "I'm sorry." Carol stopped. "I don't understand." "I know." Lauren pressed her lips together. She looked around the room. She was doing the handling thing, trying to, anyway, but it was slipping. Her hands were tight at her sides. I told you I was bringing my boyfriend because I didn't want to spend the weekend being everyone's project. I thought if I just had someone, a real person, someone I trusted, then we could all just focus on Grandma and it would be okay. She exhaled. I'm sorry. I should have handled it differently. I know that. So Ryan isn't your boyfriend, Vanessa said. Her voice was quiet now. The sharp edge had fallen out of it. The room looked at Ryan. He stood in the doorway between the deck and the living room and looked at Lauren, and she looked back at him, and her eyes said something very clear. You're off the hook. You can let this go, I'll carry it. And he thought no. Absolutely not. Not a chance. He stepped into the room. We had an agreement, he said. His voice was calm. The ER voice. The one that held things steady. Lauren asked me to come this weekend as her boyfriend because she wanted her grandmother to have a birthday that wasn't overshadowed by everyone treating her life like a problem to solve. That was the deal. That was the arrangement. He paused. And it was the arrangement when we got here. He looked at Lauren. She was watching him with an expression he had never seen before. Completely open, completely unguarded, like someone who had given up defending a door and was now standing in it. But I'm not going to stand here and tell you that's all it is now, he said. Because it's not. Tom went very still. I have been in love with your daughter for the better part of a year, Ryan's, and the words were the clearest thing he had ever said in his life. Clearer than any emergency decision, cleaner than any diagnosis. I have been in love with her and I convinced myself that it was friendship because friendship felt safer and I am very good at choosing safe things. And this weekend, pretending to be what I actually am, which is someone who is completely gone on her, was the most honest I've been with myself in 3 years. The room was silent. Lauren's eyes were bright. She was not crying. She was doing that thing she did where she pushed against the feeling to keep it from showing. And she was losing. She is not damaged. Ryan's, and he was looking at the room now at all of them, at Vanessa specifically. She is not broken, and she is not running away from real love. She ended an engagement because she knew that staying in it would have required her to disappear into it. And she loved herself enough not to do that, and that is the single bravest thing I have ever seen a person do. He stopped. She deserves better than being treated like a family emergency every time you get together. The silence held for 5 more seconds, and then Evelyn's voice came from the hallway. Well, she said. Everyone turned. She was standing at the edge of the living room, leaning on the doorframe, with an expression that was completely composed, not surprised, not upset, just satisfied, the way someone looks when an outcome they expected has arrived on schedule. I knew, she said simply. I knew on Friday. She moved into the room, slowly and deliberately, and she stopped in the center of it and looked around at her family with the authority of 80 years. I recognized it when they walked in. Not the performance. The real thing underneath it. Carol's voice was very small. Mom, I'm not upset, Evelyn said with a firmness that closed the question. A woman who is not honest about needing help is still a woman who needs help. My granddaughter needed help, and she asked for it from the person she trusted most. I don't see what requires an apology. She looked at Lauren. The only thing I want to know is whether you're going to stop being afraid of him. Lauren looked at Ryan. Something in her face had cracked open, not broken but open. The way a window opens when the latch finally releases. Grandma, she said. Yes or no, Evelyn said. The room held its breath. Lauren took 2 steps across the living room and put her hand on Ryan's arm. And she looked up at him. And she said very quietly, I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid I'm too much for you to stay for. And that was the thing. That was the thing right there that he had needed to hear and had been circling for 11 months without finding. He covered her hand with his. You are not too much, he said. You are exactly the right amount, and I have been running from it because I am an idiot. She laughed. It came out surprised and a little wet and completely genuine, and the room around them exhaled. Evelyn sat down in the nearest chair. Good, she said. Now someone bring me a piece of that cake. The room broke. Not into chaos, into the particular release of a group of people who have been holding something tightly and have just been given permission to put it down. Carol made a sound that was either laughing or crying. Tom sat down heavily on the couch and rubbed his face. 2 of the younger cousins ran back out to the deck, sensing that whatever the adult thing was, it had resolved. Vanessa stood very still in the corner. Lauren was still standing with Ryan when Vanessa crossed to them. She stopped in front of Lauren, and she had the look of someone who was carrying something she had been carrying for a while and was ready to set down. "I'm sorry," Vanessa said. "I shouldn't have read the message, and I shouldn't have read it in a room full of people." Lauren looked at her cousin for a long moment. Their whole history was in that look: childhood summers and complicated holidays, and all the years of Vanessa's precision pressing against Lauren's openness, and underneath all of it, the stubbornness of people who are family and know it. "You called Grant," Lauren said. Vanessa winced. "Yes." That wasn't so agreed. "It wasn't." "Why?" Vanessa was quiet for a moment. "Because I thought you were hiding, and I thought the way to stop you from hiding was to make you deal with the thing you were hiding from." She shook her head. "I didn't think through what I was actually doing. I was so busy being right about your pattern that I didn't stop to ask if my method was." She stopped. "I'm sorry, Lauren. I genuinely am." Lauren studied her. "Did you think I was making a mistake?" "With Ryan?" "No," Vanessa said. And she said it immediately, without the careful timing she put into most of her sentences. "No. I thought he might be. I didn't think you were." She glanced at Ryan. "He's not." Lauren's exhaled slowly and reached out and put her hand briefly on Vanessa's arm. Not a hug, not forgiveness exactly, but something real. An acknowledgement. A beginning. Vanessa nodded and stepped back, and that was enough for now. Outside on the deck, someone had put on music, something old and slow, the kind of music that makes a party feel like a memory in real time. Ryan could hear Tom's voice, and Carol's laugh, and the sound of children, and somewhere underneath all of it, Evelyn humming along from her chair. Lauren turned to Ryan. "I want to say something," she said quietly. "Okay, I picked you because you were safe," she said. "That's why I called you for this. Not because I thought you'd be convincing. Not because I thought you knew my family. Because with you, I don't feel like I have to be smaller to fit. And that's the thing I haven't felt with anyone, not since before Grant, really." She paused. "And I thought that meant you were just a friend. Because that's what safe people are. Friends. But I think I was wrong." Ryan looked at her. "You were wrong." "I was wrong," she agreed, and she almost smiled. "For the record," he said, "when you called this a fake boyfriend situation, you were already describing something that had been real for months. You were just using the wrong word for it." She looked at him. "What's the right word?" "Terrifying," he said. "Inevitable. Take your pick." She laughed again, that surprised, helpless laugh, and he felt the sound of it go all the way through him, the way things do, when you have been denying yourself something real for long enough that finally having it feels like oxygen. "So what do we do now?" she said. "Now," he said, "I think we go eat birthday cake and act like people who are not completely overwhelmed." "Can we do that?" "Probably not well," he said, "but we can try." She took his hand fully, deliberately, with all 5 fingers, not the half reach of someone looking for steadiness, but the grip of someone choosing, and they went back out to the deck together. Evelyn had her cake. She was holding the plate in both hands and looking at Ryan and Lauren the moment they stepped outside. And when she saw their joined hands, she looked down at her cake with the expression someone confirming a solution they had known all along. She took a bite and closed her eyes and said, "To no one in particular, 80 years, and it still surprises me how long people take to find what's already right in front of them." No one answered, but Ryan heard it. The party wound on into the late afternoon, and the light went golden the way it does in the mountains, and the family moved around them in that easy way of people who have processed something and are ready to let it settle. Tom shook Ryan's hand at one point, briefly, without ceremony, just the single solid shake of a man who had come to a decision and was marking it. Carol hugged Lauren for a long moment near the kitchen and said something Ryan couldn't hear, and Lauren's face went through about 6 things in 4 seconds, and then she pulled back and nodded. Even the cousins had absorbed some shift in the atmosphere and were behaving, which Ryan suspected was the most dramatic outcome of the whole weekend. At 5:15, while Lauren was inside helping with the cleanup, Ryan stepped off the deck and walked down toward the dock. Not all the way out, just to the beginning of it, where the wood met the grass. He stood there and looked at the water. He heard footsteps behind him. Unhurried, careful Evelyn. He turned and moved toward her automatically, and she took his arm, and they walked slowly to the edge of the dock, the same way they had on Friday night, except everything was different now. He was different. The weekend had done something to him that he couldn't fully account for, yet something that had rearranged a room he thought was fixed, moved all the furniture to where it was actually supposed to go. "You did well today," Evelyn said. "Lauren did the hard part," he said. "You made it possible for her to do the hard part," she said. "That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot." He looked at the water. "I'm scared," he said. Not performing honesty. Just the fact of it. I'm genuinely scared. Not of her. Of who I might be when this gets difficult. When it's not a weekend at a lake house with a built-in ending. When it's just Tuesday. Just regular life, regular hard, regular ordinary. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Harold and I had 38 years. 38 years of Tuesdays." She paused. Some of them were terrible. He was stubborn, I was proud, and we were both too young for too long. We hurt each other in ways that took years to repair. She turned to look at Ryan. "And there was not a single morning in 38 years that I woke up and did not want him in the room." Ryan looked at her. "That's what you're reaching for," she said. "Not the lake house weekend. Not the performance. Not the drama. Not the feeling of a story reaching its climax." She looked at him with those clear, steady eyes. "The Tuesday morning. The person you want in the room on an ordinary day. Is she that for you?" He didn't have to think about it. He had, in fact, been thinking about it for 11 months, without naming the answer. "Yes," he said. Evelyn squeezed his arm. "Then stop being afraid of what you might do and start being the person who stays." She paused. "You already know how. You've been doing it without realizing it." She released his arm and looked back toward the house. "I'm cold. Take me in." He walked her back up the dock and across the grass and up the steps to the porch, and at the door she stopped and turned to look at him one more time. And she said it. 4 words. Quiet and certain and absolute. In the voice of someone who had spent 80 years learning what was worth saying and what wasn't. "Don't let her go." He stood on the porch and felt those 4 words land somewhere permanent. Not in his head, where decisions got made and unmade and second-guessed until they had no shape left. Somewhere deeper. Somewhere that didn't debate. She went inside. Ryan stood on the porch in the late afternoon light, and he heard Lauren's voice from inside the kitchen, and he thought, Tuesday morning. Oat milk lattes. Jane Eyre on the bad weeks. The silence between two people who don't need to fill the space. He had spent 3 years building a life with the specific architecture of something that would not hurt when it ended, because he had already decided it would end before he had let it begin. He was done building that. He went inside to find Lauren. He found her in the kitchen. She was standing at the sink with her back to the door, washing the cake plates with the focused efficiency she applied to everything, when she was thinking too hard about something else. The rest of the family had drifted, some back to the deck, some into the living room, the cousins somewhere upstairs. The kitchen was quiet in the specific way of a room that has recently held a lot of noise and hasn't settled back to itself yet. Ryan stood in the doorway for a second, just long enough to confirm what Evelyn's 4 words had rearranged in him. Then he walked in. "Hey," he said. Lauren turned. Her eyes went to his face, immediately reading him, the way she always did. That quick assessment she had gotten so accurate it sometimes felt like she could take his temperature without touching him. "Hey," she said. She turned the water off. "Where were you?" "Doc," he said. "With your grandmother." Something moved across Lauren's face. "She went out there again?" "Ryan, she's supposed to be resting." "She's fine," he said. "She wanted air. I walked her out and back." He paused. She said something. Lauren went still. The dish in her hand hovered. "What did she say?" He crossed the kitchen. "Not fast, just steady. The way you move when you have finally stopped second-guessing the direction." He stopped close enough that she had to look up at him, and he said, "She told me not to let you go." The dish went carefully into the drying rack. Lauren looked at him for a long moment with an expression he was still learning to read. This one had too many layers, too many things moving at once. Then she said very quietly, "She told you." "Yeah." "She didn't tell me." "She told you other things," he said. "She told me you needed someone who saw you. She told me you were afraid I wouldn't stay." He held her gaze. She was right about both. Lauren pressed her lips together. She turned her face slightly to the side, the way she did when she was pushing against, feeling too much in a room where other people might walk in. He waited. "I have spent," she said finally, "a very long time being careful about what I want. About what I say I want. About who I let close enough to matter." She looked back at him. "And I was careful with you. I was so careful. I called it friendship for almost a year, and I meant it, or I thought I meant it, and the whole time." She stopped. "The whole time," he finished. "We were doing the real thing, and calling it something else. Yes, she said. I know it terrifies me, she said. Not you, the size of it, how much I would lose if this goes wrong. Because you're not just someone I'm attracted to. You're the person I call first. You're the person I called when the peony delivery came in damaged at 11 at night, and you stayed on the phone for 45 minutes, knowing absolutely nothing about flowers. I know a little about flowers now, he said. She laughed, short and surprised. You know that peonies need to be kept in cool water when they're damaged, and that ranunculus is my favorite, and that calla lilies give me a headache. The smell, he said, too sweet. She stared at him. You remember everything. I pay attention, he said. To you specifically. I have been paying attention to you, specifically for 11 months, Lauren. And I kept telling myself it was just how I was with people I cared about. But Marcus has been my best friend for 6 years, and I cannot tell you one thing he has ever ordered at a coffee shop. The corner of her mouth moved. I need to say something, he said. And I need you to let me finish before you respond, because I have a habit of backing away from difficult things, and I am not going to do that this time. She nodded. Her arms were crossed, not closed off, just holding herself, the posture of someone bracing for something they want. I fell in love with you slowly, he said, not this weekend. This weekend I just ran out of places to put it. But it happened in February, I think, honestly. The Valentine's Day thing. Your shop, the venue, the phone calls, 2 in the morning, going through the contract language. Driving home, I thought, I should be annoyed. I was supposed to have an early shift. I was exhausted. And I was not annoyed at all. I realized I would do it again tomorrow. I would do it every night for the rest of my life if that's what you needed, and not because I'm a good friend. Because I could not imagine not being the person you called. Lauren uncrossed her arms. I am scared, he continued. I want to be honest about that. I have a specific and well-documented history of leaving when things get real. I left a relationship 3 years ago because it started to matter, and I decided that the risk of losing it was greater than the cost of ending it, which is honestly, that's a terrible calculus. That's the math of someone who doesn't believe he deserves the thing he wants. And I have been sitting with that this weekend, and what I keep coming back to is that the thing I would lose, the thing I would be choosing to lose, is you. And I cannot make the numbers work anymore. He stopped. Lauren looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were bright. She was not going to cry. He knew her well enough to know she was deciding not to, the same way she had been deciding not to all weekend. Just holding it back with sheer will. You said you were done running, she said. Yes. You said that in a moment of high emotion in front of my entire family, she said. And there was something very careful in her voice now. Very precise. I need to know if you mean it when it's Tuesday. When it's boring. When we have an argument about something stupid and nobody's grandmother is in the room, making you feel like your love life is a moral imperative. He felt the corner of his mouth move. That's a fair question. I'm serious, I know you are. He held her gaze. I mean it on Tuesday. I mean it when it's boring. I have no way to prove that to you today. It's only provable over time. And I know that. But I am not asking you to trust the version of me from a high-emotion weekend in front of your grandmother. He paused. I'm asking you for a first date. A real one. Just us, no borrowed backstory, no performance. After we get home, and if that goes well, another one. Lauren looked at him. 1 date, she said. 1 date. She was quiet for a moment that stretched long enough to make his chest tight. Then she said, we have already had approximately a year's worth of first date conversations, you know. Yeah, he said. We have a head start. She looked at him for another beat. Then she stepped forward and kissed him. It was not a grand gesture. There was nothing performed or dramatic about it. It was simply the most natural conclusion to 11 months of parallel motion. The thing that had been building in the quiet, ordinary accumulation of Sundays, and phone calls, and coffee cups and late nights. Her hand found the side of his face, and he put his hands on her arms, and they stood in her grandmother's kitchen in the Sunday afternoon stillness, and finally stopped circling. When she pulled back, she kept her hand on his face for another second, and she was looking at him with something clear and certain, and very, very Lauren, and she said, for the record, I called this a fake boyfriend situation because I was afraid you would say no if I told you the real reason I wanted you there. What was the real reason, he said. Because you're the only person I have ever wanted to show my grandmother, she said. Because I knew she would see it. And I wanted her to. He stood very still. Yeah, Lauren said, softly. She did. From the living room, there was a burst of noise, a child laughing. Tom's voice, the particular chaos of a family afternoon winding toward evening. Lauren stepped back and turned to the sink and picked up another dish, and the movement was so ordinary, so perfectly Lauren, that he felt the warmth of it go all the way through him. "Help me dry," she said. He picked up a dish towel. They washed and dried the rest of the birthday dishes in the Sunday afternoon quiet, and it was the simplest thing in the world, and it was everything. The family started saying goodbyes at 6. The cousins left first. The ones with children had the furthest to drive, and children's patience with long goodbyes is limited and non-negotiable. Carol managed the departures with the same organized warmth she had managed everything, hugging each person with specific attention. The hug of a woman who understood that the in-between moments of family life were the substance of it. Tom shook hands and clapped backs and had a quiet word with each person that looked like small talk and probably wasn't. Because Tom Bennett was a man who understood that the real conversations happened in the margins. Vanessa found Lauren near the door during a lull between departures. Ryan was close enough to hear. He stayed where he was, not moving in, giving them the space the moment required. "I want to say this properly," Vanessa said. She had the look of someone who had been composing the sentence for a while. "I have spent a long time thinking that protecting you meant testing the people around you, making sure they were good enough before you let them in too far. And I told myself that was love, that it was looking out for you." She stopped. "But what it actually was me making your choices for you, deciding what you could handle and what you couldn't. And that's not love. That's control." Lauren was quiet. "You ended the engagement because you knew it wasn't right," Vanessa said. "And I supported you on that. But some part of me also, I wondered whether you were running. And I held on to that doubt longer than I should have. And when Ryan showed up, I thought, here's where we find out. And instead of just letting it find out, I had to engineer it. I had to invite Grant. I had to push." She shook her head. "I'm sorry, genuinely, not the social sorry, the real one." Lauren looked at her cousin for a long moment. All the history in that look, the shared summers, the complicated teenage years, the way they had circled each other for 30 years, too similar in some ways and too different in others, never quite arriving at easy. "You're the most exhausting person I know," Lauren said. Vanessa winced. "And you're also one of the only people who has always shown up," Lauren continued. "Even when your methods were terrible, you showed up." She crossed her arms. "I'm angry about Grant. I'm going to be angry about that for a little while, and you need to let me be." "Okay," Vanessa said. "But I know you weren't trying to hurt me." "I wasn't," Vanessa said. "I know." Lauren uncrossed her arms. "We're fine, Vanessa, we're not. This doesn't break us. But we have to talk about it for real at some point." "Not today." "Not today," Vanessa agreed. She glanced over at Ryan. "He's very good, you know." For what it's worth, from someone who spent 2 days actively trying to catch him out. Lauren followed her gaze. Something gentle moved across her face. "I know," she said. Vanessa hugged her, a real one this time. Not the performed warmth of Friday afternoon, but something that acknowledged everything that had happened between. Lauren hugged back. They were not simple with each other, and they never would be, but they were family, and family, Ryan had been reminded this weekend, was its own specific kind of love, the kind that doesn't require you to be clean or easy, just real. Vanessa said her goodbye to Ryan on the way out. She stopped in front of him, and she was already in her jacket and her precision was restored, the social composure back in place, but her eyes were different from the eyes that had measured him on Friday. "I was wrong about you," she said. "You were doing your job," he said. "As you understood it." She almost smiled. "Try not to be an idiot," she said. "I make no promises," he said, "but I'm working on it." She left. By 7:30 the house was quiet. The family had gone. The decorated porch had been partly cleared. The birthday balloons moved in the evening air. Carol and Tom were in the kitchen doing the final cleanup, moving around each other with the easy economy of people who have shared a kitchen for 30 years, and the sound of them low voices. The occasional laugh was the sound of something that had lasted. Ryan sat with Evelyn on the back porch. She had a cup of tea and a blanket across her lap, and she was looking at the lake, which had gone dark and reflective in the early evening, and she looked not tired exactly. Complete. The way people look at the end of something they are glad to have had. "Good birthday?" he asked. "Exceptional birthday," she said. "Better than I expected. Significantly more eventful." "I'm sorry about that," he said. "The eventful part." She waved her hand. "Don't be. I have been attending family events for 80 years, Ryan. The uneventful ones are the ones nobody remembers. She drank her tea. You'll remember this one, I will, he said. She looked at him sideways. She kissed you. He looked at her. She told you? I saw it, Evelyn said simply. I came around the kitchen doorway at the wrong time, or the right time, depending on how you look at it. I went back the way I came. It didn't seem like a moment that needed a witness. She paused. But I saw it. Ryan looked out at the water. I'm going to do this right, he said. Not to Evelyn specifically. Just out loud. The way you say the real things, sometimes not to a particular person, but to the air, to the honesty of an open space. I am going to do this, slowly and carefully, and I am not going to run when it gets hard. No, Evelyn agreed. You're not. I don't know how to fully trust that yet, he said. That I won't, I want to. But I have a history. Everyone has a history, she said. The question is whether your history is something that happened to you, or something you keep choosing. She set her tea down. You stopped choosing it this weekend. The rest is just showing up. Every day. Choosing it, he nodded slowly. She is going to need patience, Evelyn said. Not because she's difficult. Because she spent 2 years rebuilding something very carefully, and she built it to hold one person at a time. She'll let you in the rest of the way, but she'll do it in her own time and on her own terms. I know, he said. And you're going to need to let her, she said. Not push, not rush. Just be there, consistently. I can do that, he said. Can you? She said it directly. No softness in it, just the clear question. He turned to look at her. Yes, he said, I can. She looked at him for a long moment, with those eyes that had been looking at people, clearly for 80 years. Then she nodded once, with the same decisiveness Vanessa had, when she reached a conclusion. Genetic, Ryan thought. The Bennett women decided things, and then committed to the decision. Good, she said. Then stop sitting here with me and go be with my granddaughter. He laughed, a real one, surprised out of him. She's inside helping her parents. Then go inside and help, Evelyn said. You think love is a grand moment, but it's not. It's helping with the dishes on a Sunday evening. Go. He went. Inside, Lauren was folding tablecloths on the dining room table, while her mother carried things back and forth from the deck, and Tom was putting chairs away in the storage closet at the back of the kitchen. And the whole operation had the comfortable rhythm of a family that has done this particular cleanup together many times. Ryan walked in, and Tom handed him a stack of folded chairs without a word and pointed at the closet, and Ryan carried them in, and that was that. He spent 45 minutes helping put the lake house back together, and it was the most ordinary thing he had done all weekend, and it felt more significant than any of the dramatic moments that had preceded it. This, he thought, stacking the last of the deck chairs. This is what it actually is. This is what Evelyn means about Tuesdays. At 9 o'clock, Carol made decaf coffee, and they all sat around the kitchen table, Carol, Tom, Lauren, and Ryan, and the conversation was easy and small, and completely real. Tom talked about the pontoon boat negotiation, which had apparently been running since Thursday. Carol talked about a recipe she wanted to try for Thanksgiving. Lauren described a flower installation she was planning for a client's anniversary party in September, her hands moving the way they did when she was genuinely excited about something. Ryan sat across from her and drank his coffee and listened to her talk about the installation, the color palette, the height of the arrangements, the specific effect she wanted when guests walked in, and he thought, I am going to get to hear this for a very long time. I am going to hear her talk about her work and her plans and her small daily problems and her unremarkable Tuesday evenings, and I am going to be the luckiest I have ever been. Tom caught him looking at Lauren and looked away quickly, but not before Ryan saw him smile into his coffee cup. At 10, Lauren walked Ryan up to the guest room to get his bag, since they had agreed he would head back to Charlotte tonight, and she would follow in the morning to lock up and say a final goodbye to her parents. He picked up his bag. The room was neat. They had both been unconsciously tidy all weekend, a small mutual courtesy, and it looked exactly as it had on Friday afternoon when he had set his bag down and told himself he had this under control. He had not had it under control, so Lauren said. She was leaning against the doorframe, her arms loose at her sides, and she was watching him with that particular look she had, the one that was direct without being demanding, that waited without being passive. So he said, You're going home. I have an early shift tomorrow, he said. I know, she paused. Ryan. Yeah, thank you. She said it simply, without the weight she had put on it Friday night when she said it as a goodbye. This was different, cleaner. More settled. For all of it. The real parts and the fake parts and everything in between. There weren't very many fake parts, he said. No, she agreed. There weren't. He crossed the room and stood in front of her. She looked up at him, and he felt again what he had felt in the kitchen, of the proximity, the way she fit into his a sight, like something that had always been there. Thursday, he said. When you get dinner. A real one. Not coffee. Not Sunday brunch. An actual dinner where I make a reservation somewhere you haven't been. You're asking me on a date, she said. I am asking you on a date, he confirmed. She considered it for exactly 1 second with the focused attention she gave everything, and then she said, yes. Good, he said. He leaned down and kissed her brief, warm reel, and she put one hand flat against his chest, for just a moment in the way of someone making sure of something. When he pulled back, she was looking at him with something that wasn't complicated at all. It was just clear, just certain. Drive safe, she said. I will, he went down the stairs. At the bottom, Carol was waiting not deliberately. She had just happened to be in the entryway, which Ryan suspected was not an accident. She hugged him. A proper hug, the kind that has meaning. You're coming for Thanksgiving, she said into his shoulder. Carol, I'm not asking, she said pleasantly and released him. Tom appeared from the kitchen and shook his hand. The single solid shake. Then he said, you're good for her, which was the most direct thing Tom Bennett had said to him all weekend and clearly cost him nothing to say, because he had made up his mind about it before the sentence was finished. Ryan said goodbye and walked out to his car. The night was cool and the lake was dark and the house was lit behind him, and he stood by the driver's side door for a second and looked back at it. A light was on in the upstairs window. Evelyn's room. Behind the curtain, a silhouette moved small, deliberate, unhurried. She was probably getting ready for bed. Probably at peace. Probably exactly where she wanted to be, in the house she had loved for 30 years, at the end of the birthday she had wanted. He thought about what she had said. Don't let her go. 4 words. The most important 4 words anyone had said to him in 3 years. He got in the car. He was 20 minutes down the mountain road when his phone lit up in the cup holder. He pulled over at a safe spot and looked at it. Lauren, just so you know, Grandma just told me she knew all along. From Friday, she's extremely smug about it. He stared at the message for a second. Then he typed back. She told me she saw us in the kitchen. 3 dots, then I know she's completely unapologetic. He smiled at his phone like an idiot in a car on a mountain road at 10:15 at night. He typed, tell her she was right about everything. Another pause. Then she says she knows. He put the phone down and pulled back onto the road and drove through the dark mountain and thought about Thursday. About a reservation at a restaurant Lauren hadn't been to. About the drive over to pick her up, and the easy conversation that would fill the car, because it always did, because 11 months of daily contact had given them the kind of fluency that most couples spent years building. He thought about what came after Thursday too. The slow, ordinary accumulation of it. The Tuesday mornings. The 11:30 phone calls. The oat milk he would keep in his refrigerator, because she came over enough that it made sense. The arguments they would have, and the repairs, and the choosing to stay after each one. He thought about staying. He thought about what it would actually mean, not as an abstract commitment, not as a promise made in a high-emotion moment, but as a daily practice. The ongoing decision. The choice renewed every morning. He thought he could do it. More than that, he thought he wanted to. Not because he had to, not because leaving was harder, but because the alternative, the apartment, the empty Sunday, the predictable shift and the locked door felt like something he was done choosing. Felt like a room he had lived in long enough and was ready to leave. An hour and 40 minutes later, he pulled into his parking space in Charlotte. His apartment was dark. He went upstairs and unlocked the door and stepped inside, and the quiet was exactly what it always was: complete, uninterrupted, sealed. He stood in the middle of his living room and looked at it. It was a good apartment. Comfortable. Exactly right for one person who had designed his life around the specific dimensions of one person. He took out his phone. He called Marcus. It rang twice. It's 11:15, Marcus said by way of greeting. I'm in love with Lauren, Ryan said. A pause. Then flatly, took you long enough. I know. I've been saying this for 8 months. I know you owe me $20, Marcus said. I bet Davis you'd figure it out before the end of the year. You bet your friends on my love life. You were taking forever. It was either bet on it or stage an intervention. He paused. So what happened? Did you tell her? It was a whole thing, Ryan said. I'll explain later, but yes. And Thursday, Ryan said. We have a date on Thursday. Marcus was quiet for a second. Then he said, with the genuine warmth that lived underneath all of his teasing, "Good, man. It's about time." "Yeah," Ryan said. "It is." He hung up and sat down on his couch in his quiet apartment, and he did not feel the quiet the same way. It was the same room, the same furniture, the same four walls. But something had shifted in the calibration. The empty had a different quality now. Not loneliness exactly. More like a space being held. Like a room that knows it's temporary. He sat there until midnight, not doing much of anything, just sitting with the extraordinary ordinary fact of it. On the coffee table, his phone lit up one more time. "Lauren, Grandma just told me she wants us at the lake house in August. Then I told her that was 4 months away. And she said, so you have 4 months to stop wasting time." He laughed out loud in his apartment at midnight, alone. He typed back, "Tell her I said deal." He set the phone down. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes, and for the first time in longer than he could accurately remember, he fell asleep on his couch without trying, without negotiating with his own brain, without any of the careful architecture of avoidance that had been the ceiling of his nights for 3 years. He just slept. Thursday came. Ryan made the reservation on Monday morning, sitting at the nurse's station between charts, on his phone with a restaurant in Plaza Midwood that Lauren had mentioned exactly once, 4 months ago, while describing a wedding installation she had done nearby. She had said the building had good bones. She said the lighting was warm. She had said it without expectation, just the casual observation of someone who noticed things, and he had filed it without consciously deciding to, the way he filed everything about her. He texted Marcus the name of the restaurant to confirm it wasn't a terrible choice. Marcus texted back perfect, and then immediately after, "How do you know about that place?" And Ryan did not respond because there was no answer to that question that didn't require an entire conversation he didn't have time for between patients. He called Lauren on Monday evening. Not to talk about Thursday, just because he called her on Mondays, had for months, and there was no reason to stop. She answered on the second ring with a slightly distracted energy that meant she was finishing something at the shop. "Hold on," she said. "I'm just okay. Done." "Hi," he said. "How was your shift?" "Long," he said. "How's the peony situation?" She had texted him Sunday about a second damaged delivery, a different supplier, same problem. He had remembered. She had not expected him to remember, which he could tell from the brief pause before she answered. "Resolved," she said. "I switched vendors. It's handled." "Good." They talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular: her installation timeline, his upcoming rotation change, a podcast she thought he should listen to, a patient who had said something that made him laugh in the middle of a difficult shift and had carried him through the rest of it. The conversation had the quality it always had: easy, unforced, the kind of talking that doesn't require anyone to perform interest, because the interest is just there. At the end of it, Lauren said, "Thursday. 7 o'clock, he said. "I'll pick you up." A pause. "You know this is going to feel very strange," she said. "Going somewhere with you and calling it a date. Does it feel wrong?" Another pause. Longer. "No," she said. "That's what's strange about it." He smiled at his apartment ceiling. 7 o'clock, he said again. 7 o'clock, she confirmed, and he could hear her smiling. Thursday came, and he picked her up at 7, and she opened the door in a green dress he had never seen before. Simple. Nothing elaborate. Just the right dress, and she looked at him with an expression that was half familiar and half completely new. The face of someone he knew entirely, and was also meeting for the first time. And he thought, this is what the beginning of everything looks like. "You look," he started. "Don't make it weird," she said. "I was going to say nice." "Sure you were," she said. But she was smiling, and she locked her door and they went downstairs. The dinner was good. Not because the food was exceptional, though it was, and not because the lighting was everything Lauren had described, though it was. It was good because they had been having conversations like this for 11 months, deep, real, circling each other honestly. And now they were doing it, without the architecture of friendship holding them at the correct distance. Now they were doing it as what they actually were. And the difference was not as dramatic as either of them had expected, and that itself was the revelation. About an hour in, Lauren looked at him across the table and said, "It doesn't feel different." "No," he agreed. "That should feel disappointing," she said. "It doesn't." "Because it's not," he said. "The thing that's different isn't us. It's that we stopped pretending it was something smaller than it is." She looked at him for a moment. "When did you get articulate about emotions?" "I've been practicing," he said. "Internally. For months." She laughed. He filed the sound of it. He was always filing the sound of it. They walked after dinner. The neighborhood was warm, and the evening was one of those Charlotte nights in late spring where the air is exactly the right temperature, and the city is doing its best impression of somewhere easy to love. She put her hand in his, and neither of them mentioned it. It was just the natural next step in a sequence that had been moving in that direction for a very long time. At her door, she turned to look at him and said, "Same time next week?" "Yes," he said, "except I'm cooking." "You cook?" "I've been practicing that too." She raised her eyebrows. "Internally?" "I watched some videos," he admitted, and she laughed again, full and helpless, and he kissed her at her doorstep in the warm Charlotte night. And it was the most natural thing that had ever happened to him. That was the first Thursday. There were many more Thursdays after it. What followed was not a movie version of a love story. It did not have a consistent upward line. It had the shape of something real, which meant it had good stretches and harder ones. Moments of perfect clarity, and moments where they both had to choose, actively and consciously, to stay in the room with the difficulty instead of stepping out of it. The first real argument happened 6 weeks in. It was about Ryan's schedule, a last-minute shift change that wiped out a plan they had made, which happened because emergency medicine was unpredictable, and life in an ER did not organize itself around anyone's dinner reservations. Lauren was not unreasonable about it. She said she understood. She said it was fine. 3 days later, she admitted it was not entirely fine. She said she needed to know, not that he would always be available. She understood that wasn't possible, but that when he wasn't, he would tell her honestly, in real time, instead of letting her figure it out from a text sent 40 minutes before she was supposed to meet him somewhere. She said she had spent a significant portion of her previous relationship translating what she was told into what was actually happening, and she was not willing to do that again. She said it clearly, and without anger, which cost her something. He could tell she was more comfortable absorbing difficulty quietly than naming it out loud to the person who had caused it. He listened. He did not defend himself. He said, "You're right. I should have called you the minute the change came through. I'll do better." She looked at him like she was checking whether he meant it. "I mean it," he said. "Not because I have to. Because you matter more than the habit of handling things alone." She nodded. "Oh, okay," she said. It was the first repair. They made others, smaller ones, over the months that followed. Each one built something. Each one was a Tuesday in Evelyn's sense, ordinary, unremarkable, not the stuff of stories. Just two people choosing to keep choosing, one small decision at a time. Ryan got good at not running. Not immediately. It was not a switch that got flipped on Sunday night at the lake house and stayed on. It was a practice. There were moments, particularly in the early months, where he felt the old reflex, the ER-trained instinct to make a clean decision and execute it, before the feeling could grow larger than the container he had built for it. There were moments where he had to sit in discomfort that wanted to be resolved and instead just be in it, because Lauren had asked him once quietly, not as a demand, if he could just sometimes stay in the hard thing with her, instead of trying to fix it immediately. He was not naturally equipped for that. He learned it. She saw him learning. She did not make a performance of it. She was not the kind of person who gave gold stars for emotional growth. But there were moments when he had stayed in something difficult, had resisted the reflex, had sat with her in the uncomfortable truth of some ordinary conflict without reaching for a resolution she hadn't asked for, and she would look at him with something clear and grateful and say nothing. And the nothing meant everything. She let him in slowly. Evelyn had been right about that too. Lauren opened one door at a time, with full intention and never all at once. He learned her apartment, then her routines, then the specific texture of her hard weeks. He learned what she needed when she was overwhelmed, not reassurance, but presence. Not advice, but the particular kind of quiet that says, "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, and you don't have to perform fine for me." She learned him too. She learned the signs of a bad shift before he admitted it, the specific silence he used when something at work had gotten under his skin, the way he moved in her kitchen when he was trying to decompress, the things he needed that he did not know how to ask for, because 3 years of a sealed apartment had made asking feel like a liability. She handed him those things without being asked. He noticed every time. August came. They went back to the lake house. It was different this time. They arrived on a Friday afternoon in his car, the same 2.5-hour drive. And Lauren did not have a folder, and he did not have a role to learn. And when the lake house appeared at the end of the gravel drive, he felt something completely opposite from the controlled apprehension of that first arrival. He felt like arriving somewhere. Evelyn was on the porch when they pulled up. She looked better than he had expected, not well, exactly. Not without the careful maintenance of someone managing a body that required management, but present, sharp, wearing a blue cardigan and holding a cup of tea and watching them come up the drive with an expression of profound satisfaction. Lauren bounded up the steps and hugged her grandmother, and Evelyn held on with that same closed eyes grip from the first weekend, and then she looked over Lauren's shoulder at Ryan. He climbed the steps and bent down and kissed her cheek. She took his hand in both of hers the way she had on Friday afternoon 11 months ago, and she looked at him with those clear eyes that had seen everything. And she said simply, "You stayed." "I stayed," he said. She patted his hand once firmly, and released it, and said, "Good. Now come inside. I made something, and I need someone to tell me honestly if it tastes right, because your generation has terrible taste, but your instincts are acceptable." He laughed and held the door open and followed her inside. The weekend was easy. Genuinely easy, not the manufactured ease of two people performing relaxation, but the real thing. The ease of people who have settled into each other. Tom and Carol were there. Vanessa came Saturday with her partner, a calm and patient man named David, who had clearly developed sophisticated coping mechanisms for Vanessa's particular energy, and who Ryan liked immediately. A few cousins, their kids, the familiar organized chaos of the Bennett family in motion. Ryan helped with the meals without being asked. He made coffee in the mornings the way he had learned to make it, Lauren's specific order first, then Evelyn's, then his own, and then however many others wandered into the kitchen in the next 15 minutes. Tom handed him the good beer from the separate cooler on the first evening without a word, which was the highest available recognition in Tom Bennett's social vocabulary, and Ryan received it accordingly. On Saturday afternoon, he and Lauren walked the property line while the family rested. The lake, the grass, the old rose garden that Lauren had been working on for months. She had brought cuttings from her shop and replanted sections over the spring, and they were growing. He knew them by name now, the varieties she had chosen, because she had talked about them enough that the names had taken hold without him meaning to learn them. "Grandma walked out here yesterday," Lauren said, pausing at the edge of the garden. "By herself. She told me she wanted to see whether the Juliet roses had opened." "Had they?" "3 of them," Lauren said. She stood there for about 5 minutes just looking at them. And then she said, "Your young man has good hands. He helped me plant these, he had." He had come up in April, one Saturday, with Lauren and a trunk full of soil and tools, and spent the afternoon on his knees in Evelyn's garden. It had not occurred to him to think of it as significant. He had just been helping. Lauren was looking at him now with that look, the one that was too many things and fully clear at the same time. "She loves you," Lauren said. "You know that, I know," he said. "She doesn't love easily," Lauren said. "She loves people who earn it, not by performing but by showing up consistently in the small ways. She told me once that grand gestures are easy. Showing up on an ordinary Tuesday is the hard thing." He reached out and tucked her hair back from her face, the same gesture from the dock on Saturday night. The first time he had touched her that way, and she leaned into it slightly. The same involuntary motion. And he thought, this is the thing that doesn't get old. This exact moment, repeated and unremarkable and everything. "I want to ask you something," he said. She looked at him. "Okay, not today," he said. "I'm not asking today. I just want you to know that I'm going to ask. At some point. And I'm telling you in advance because you told me once that you needed to feel like you saw things coming, that felt like ambushes. And you needed the space to arrive at things in your own time." Lauren was very still. "So I'm giving you the space," he said. "I'm telling you that I intend to ask. And whenever you're ready to hear it, I'll ask it." She looked at him for a long moment. He could see her processing that focused internal movement of someone taking in information and letting it settle before responding. He waited. He had gotten very good at waiting for Lauren. Not the impatient waiting of someone managing their own anxiety, but the real thing, the waiting of someone who trusted that whatever she arrived at would be worth arriving at. "Okay," she said finally. Her voice was quiet but not uncertain. "Okay," said. "Okay," she said again. And then I might not need as much space as I used to. He felt the weight of that. The full, exact weight of what it cost her to say it, and what it meant that she had said it anyway. "That's good to know," he said. And his voice came out rougher than he intended. And she saw that. And she stepped forward and put her arms around him in the garden. And he held on. Evelyn's 81st birthday was in October. They drove up on a Saturday, just Ryan and Lauren, a smaller gathering, more intimate than the summer before. Carol made the cake. Tom made the coffee. Vanessa arrived with David and a bottle of wine she had been saving for an occasion she hadn't specified yet. And she set it on the table and said, "This feels like the right occasion," and nobody disagreed. After dinner, while the family was in the living room, Ryan went out to the dock. The lake in October was different. From the lake in June, the air was sharp, and the water was darker, and the trees had turned, and the whole world had the quality of something beautiful in transition. Something that understood it was changing and was not afraid of it. He had a small box in his jacket pocket. He had been carrying it for 3 weeks, since the jeweler in Charlotte had called to say it was ready. He had picked it up on a Monday and driven it home and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. And it had been there through 8 shifts and 6 dinners, and 1 argument about whether they should get a dog, and approximately 40 days of the ordinary accumulating life he had been building with Lauren since a Sunday afternoon 11 months. Before that, when he had stood on a porch and heard Evelyn's 4 words and understood for the first time what staying actually meant. He heard footsteps on the dock behind him. He knew them. Lauren came and stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder, looking at the water. She had her hands in her coat pockets. The dock was the same dock. The water was the same water. He was not the same man who had stood here in June, trying to convince himself he had things under control. "Cold," she said. "Yeah," he said. "Worth it though," she said. "Yeah," he said, "it is." She turned to look at him. Something in his stillness, he had always been still. But this was different. This was the stillness of someone who has made a decision and is standing inside it, registered with her. He could see the recognition move across her face. "Ryan," she said. "I told you I was going to ask," he said. She inhaled. He turned to face her and took the box from his pocket and held it in the space between them, and he did not open it immediately. He just held it, and he looked at her, and he said, "I am not perfect at this. I am going to keep getting better, and I am going to mistakes, and there are going to be Tuesdays that are hard, and I am going to need you to tell me when I'm reverting to old habits, and I will tell you the same. But I am not going anywhere. That's the thing I can promise you cleanly. I am not going anywhere." Lauren was looking at the box in his hand. Her eyes were bright. She was doing the thing, pushing against the feeling, and she was losing again, same as she had in the kitchen on Sunday afternoon in June. And he loved that about her. The way she fought her own emotion and lost to it in the best possible way. "That's the part I need most," she said quietly. He opened the box. She looked at the ring. It was simple. He and she would want simple, had known it without asking, because he had been paying attention for a very long time. A solitaire, warm metal, nothing that would interfere with her work at the shop. The jeweler had asked what she was like, and he had talked for 20 minutes and the jeweler had some amusement. "I think I understand." "Lauren," he said. She looked up from the ring to his face. "Will you stay?" he said. "Not because of anyone watching, not because of what anyone expects. Just because this is what we're building, and I want to build it with you. Will you stay?" She looked at him for a moment that contained everything: the Thursday coffee shop, the 11 months of Sundays, the damaged peony delivery at 11 at night, the folder she had made, the drive to Asheville, the dock in the dark, Evelyn's 4 words, the first Thursday dinner, every argument and repair, the April afternoon in the rose garden, the dog they had not gotten yet but were going to, the Tuesdays still coming in their hundreds and thousands, ordinary and irreplaceable. "Yes," she said, "I will stay." He put the ring on her finger. From the porch, behind them, there was a sound, a single sharp sound, the sound of a woman who has been watching from a distance and has just confirmed what she already knew. Neither of them turned around. They didn't need to. Later, when they came back up to the porch, Evelyn was sitting in her chair with her tea and her blanket and her expression of settled, thorough satisfaction. And she looked at Lauren's hand and then at Ryan's face, and she said nothing. She simply held out her hand. Ryan took it in both of his, the way she had taken his on that first afternoon. And she looked at him with those 81-year-old eyes that had seen everything. and what was in them was not surprise and not triumph. It was recognition. The look of someone who had seen the shape of something from the beginning and had simply waited for everyone else to catch up. "Good boy," she said quietly. He held her hand for a moment longer than he needed to, and then he let go, and Lauren sat at her grandmother's feet the way she must have done as a child, and Evelyn put her hand on her granddaughter's head, and the three of them sat on the porch in the October evening, while the family moved and laughed inside, warm and entirely real. This was not the ending of anything. It was the middle of something that intended to go on for a very long time. The lake house was kept. The rose garden grew. The Tuesday mornings accumulated coffee on the counter, Lauren's specific order, the easy silence of a shared kitchen, the life of two people who had finally stopped running from the thing they had been moving towards since a Sunday afternoon in a coffee shop in Dilworth, when a first date produced no obvious sparks and everything else instead. Evelyn had not created their love. She had only done what she had always done. She had seen clearly, she had spoken honestly, and she had trusted that the people she loved were capable of rising to meet what she saw in them. She had been right. Some loves arrive in a moment. Some build so slowly and so quietly that by the time you name them, they have already become the structure of everything, the walls, the foundation, the thing that holds the whole shape of your life upright without you ever having noticed it being built. Ryan Carter had walked into a lake house in June trying to protect his heart by keeping it at a careful distance from the one person it had already given itself to. He had not left that lake house the same man. And on an October evening on a dock in the mountains, with a ring on Lauren Bennett's finger and Evelyn's hand in his, and the sound of family carrying through the open door behind them, he understood finally fully, without reservation, without the escape hatch of doubt he had always kept unlocked, that the bravest thing he had ever done in his entire life was not a single decision made in a crisis. It was the choice made daily and without audience to stay.